one thing coming up with it, but trying to build out this whole immersive world in Decentraland took some time, but you definitely nailed it. So what was it like from moment to moment, like those days?
Oh, days and nights. Yeah, they're literally the mornings, the afternoons, the evenings, the midnights.
The weather cold, the weather so chill, chilly, willy, penguin feather roll.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of the CG Show. With me today, I have Ridley Plummer, the Australian Open's Metaverse and NFT Project Manager, leading the AO Metaverse strategy and overseeing the development of the Metaverse and Web3 projects. Ridley has been instrumental in progressing the AO launch into the Metaverse and has been with Tennis Australia and the AO for the last 4 years. Welcome. Thank you for obviously joining me today. I followed the launch in January. It went pretty bloody smooth. At the time, obviously, the market was going nuts. And I think which got me extremely interested, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you, was a massive brand entering the space. Now, there's been a lot, but not that many have actually done well. So thank you for coming on. And I think let's just start from the start. And how did you actually get into the space? And where did it all begin with you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Started probably back in 2017. I started dabbling around in crypto a little bit myself. And I think through that natural progression in crypto, sort of got into NFTs. And my first sort of foray into NFTs was NBA Top Shot, like for a lot of people it was back in probably 2019 or 2020. And then I guess through being at Tennis Australia already and sort of working across a creative commercial role in the revenue or commercial team and dabbling in that space a little bit, I had a couple of the execs come to me late October, early November last year and say, hey, we want to make a bit of a play in this space. We don't know what to do. We think you're the right person to do it. And the rest is history.
That's ridiculous. That's extremely interesting because I think it's always the other way around. I feel like it's other people trying to hound the execs and say, look at this, look what's going on. What got their interest for them to come to you? Yeah,
I think that's one of the really unique things about Tennis Australia and the Australian Open is that the top-down drivers and the executive team are incredibly innovative and incredibly creative. And I think we see that through the event. We're one of the only tennis tournaments that includes things like esports and music and restaurants and entertainment. And so naturally the next progressions from sort of this Web 2, Web 2.5 and Web 3 world was to dive straight in. And we took a pretty aggressive approach with it. And we took a model that was, I guess, being used by a lot of other sports, as you mentioned, of which some were successful and some were not necessarily successful. And we kind of flipped that on its head a little bit and wanted to do something that was completely out of the box. And I think it came to fruition really quickly and really successfully.
Was it something like, because I know the US Open did like a drop in September, October, whenever the tournament was on. Nothing like obviously what the Australian Open done, but I think, like I know myself and Michael, we ended up, we purchased that was your first NFT, Michael, at the time. They were just putting out like a collectible US Open card or something, and then they added on a few experiences. I'm not too sure if that was successful or how well it went, but did that kind of play a role with, the Australian Open to look at it and be like, hey, is this, obviously if they're doing it, it's something we should look at as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think they had, challenges and successes as well in that drop. And I think it was a great learning experience for them. It was a great opportunity for us to see what other brands were doing, particularly in the tennis space. But it was also, like you said, it was very limited. There was utility tied to it, but again, that utility was quite limited. And we felt like the design of that project was more of a conduit to the utility that it provided, that the NFTs didn't necessarily represent something that would have future value beyond the immediate utility, which is what we wanted to do differently with the AO Art Ball. We wanted that to be almost like a membership token in a way that once you own a ball, you're an OG holder and you'll benefit from owning that right into the future, whether that's with a new ball for AO23 or whitelisting or tickets or experiences or collaborations. We have this amazing network that we can leverage, and whether that's partners of the AO, broadcasters and network partners, other sporting events, other leagues, other teams, we have an amazing network to leverage, and we want to be able to give that to the holders and reward the OGs that came to the project back in January.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. So I think what was really cool, I think the design, the artwork was actually really, really mad, but I thought the coolest thing that you guys did was obviously building out this world in Decentraland and, you know, bringing that immersive experience. I think you were able to watch, I remember at the time, you were able to watch the matches in Decentraland. You had like a TV screen and stuff set up.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We obviously wanted to rebuild, and I'll go back a step. The objective of the whole project was ultimately to become the world's most accessible sports and entertainment event, whether that is coming on site in Melbourne and experiencing amazing things on site, or being able to log into Decentraland and have a virtual experience in Paris or New York or India, wherever you happen to be. You could get into that and experience a little bit of the AO virtually. We made it accessible for everyone. You didn't need a digital wallet to get into Decentraland. You could log in as a guest and just go exploring. So what we wanted to do was create this environment where people could see things that they couldn't necessarily otherwise see on broadcast or on site as well. So you mentioned like live vision. We have about 290 cameras at Melbourne Park in January. So a little bit of that was, how do we tap into some of these cameras and give people things that they can't see on their TV? Because 90 to 95% of what you see on your broadcast is from 2 or 3 camera angles. It's down the court and it's looking back at the cameras. And the viewer can't choose their own adventure on the TV. They get pushed what the broadcaster wants them to see. So if we allow them to go into a virtual world and choose whether they want to see the practice village, the press conference room, the arrivals area, the gym, the stretch zone, they can choose their own adventure through that world. So that level up of accessibility was not just to enhance the broadcast experience, but it was to give those users an experience that they can't get on site as well. You can't see the stretch zone, you can't see the gym, you can't see the player arrivals area. So we were giving that real voyeuristic, behind the curtain look at opportunity that people can't get anywhere unless you've got an accreditation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Who came up with that? Like, was it a team? Was it a whole team effort, or like where? Because you didn't have much time to really plan this. So to really think outside the square and actually execute. It's one thing coming up with it, but trying to build out this whole immersive world in Decentraland took some time, but you definitely nailed it. So how did it all play out? Like, what was it like from moment to moment, like those days?
The days and nights. The literally the mornings, the afternoons, the evenings, the midnights. From the 1st of November was basically the day that we started the event, or we started the project leading up to the event. We were incredibly lucky that as an internal team, which was very small, it was basically just myself with some loose support from a couple of the executive teams and an external consultant. We found an agency called Run It Wild, who were incredible in, I guess, facilitating connection into Decentraland, landowners in Decentraland, because don't forget, everything in Decentraland is privately owned. So we had to get access to land. We had to find people to build this stuff. We had to find people that could build it incredibly realistically and in a really short space of time. All the while, there was people designing wearables, POAPs, games, linking in that live broadcast footage. That not everyone's an expert in everything in this space. So I think
it's also new.
Absolutely. And we were really wanting to push the boundaries on what was possible. And we were sort of saying to these guys, hey, most of Melbourne Park is built tailor-made for the Australian Open each year. And that is bespoke buildings every year for our partners or activations or the kids' ballpark or the beach house or Grand Slam Oval. And we were basically just feeding them photos, CAD files, videos, saying, here's everything we can give you.
Just go hard.
I can remember walking around the site with a camera for like 45 minutes, videoing everything around the site and then sending them the file and saying, this is the best representation I can get you right now.
That's funny.
Go and build. Do what you can. And I think over the journey for probably that 3 months, I reckon we had 35 or 40 different people that touched the project, whether that be people building the activations, people designing wearables, contract writing, POAPs, design of the balls, the tech behind the balls. There were so many different elements that came into play when you look at the two different streams of NFT and then Decentraland. They were two completely different streams, although they complemented each other so well.
That's crazy. Like with the project, it was, what was the utility attached to it? And you had something cool that every ball represented a part of the court, and you had a specific number, like 6,500 and something.
Yeah.
Why was that? I was actually thinking about it. I'm like, was it? Everyone was doing 10,000. So.
Yeah, totally. And I think what was really unique about our project, it's as we were building it, there were all these little stories coming out, and there was reason for why we did everything, and that has in turn become really important, because when we started talking to media about it and telling the story about why we did this and why we did that, things like the 6776, that started to come out into conversation. And so it's great that you asked the question, because what actually happened is when we decided to divide up the court into equal plots, the data that we were getting was so accurate that we knew those plots had to be perfect. Like everyone had to be identical. We couldn't be giving someone an advantage over the other.
Fair.
Otherwise, it ruined the integrity of the game that we were creating. So when we divided the court up perfectly, we're getting these random numbers: 4,230, 5,120, 6,776. And then the next big jump when we made just a little tweak was about 9,000. So firstly, we couldn't just do a random 10,000, which would have been a bit boring anyway, because everyone was doing that. And we wanted to do things that no one was doing. So then we got this beautiful number, 6776. It was lovely and symmetrical. And then as we were saying it more, 6776 sounds like a tennis scoreline.
It does.
And we were like, this is the number. Like, it totally makes sense. So we're doing 6,776 plots and 6,776 NFTs, all tied to an individual plot, non-sequentially. So if you go and mint ball number one, if you're the first person to mint, you don't get ball number one, and you don't get plot number one. You might get ball number 450 and plot number 2,726. That was all randomized using chain link technology as well. So there was no human fingerprint over the project at all. And then the data input to that was Hawkeye ball tracking data. So in 2020, we actually removed 2021, we removed the lines people from the court, and it's now tracked with 3D line calling information or tracking or ball tracking data that essentially replicates where the ball is on the court and then puts that into a string of information. So we were getting a feed from Hawkeye that said, this is the last point at which a ball landed on the court. That corresponds with plot number 700. Therefore, that is the winning plot that is tied to ball number 300 or whatever that happened to be.
Yeah, that's
and then
crazy.
We would update that NFT with the corresponding metadata, which was relative to the person playing the player who won the match, the tournament that they were playing in. So we were following 11 tournaments, so men's and women's singles, men's and women's doubles, mixed doubles, and all the wheelchair events. And then the round in which it was in, so rounds 1 through to 4, and then quarters, semis, and finals.
That's crazy. And then what other utility was connected? So if even now, like if someone was going to purchase the balls, they're still going, and it's going to continue on for, fingers crossed, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. But like, what do they kind of get with it all?
Yeah, so I guess the premise of the project was to be a membership token. So yes, there was the beautiful artwork that came with the NFT, then the utility of being, I guess, part of a game as well. And I think when we were originally building the project, we didn't have an incredible amount of foresight because we were building so quickly in that last few weeks.
And there was a lot
in the lead up to January. Yeah. And we were already doing so much that we were like, we know we're building for something that's going to exist for as long as possible.
Yeah.
But we want to build that with the mentality of, okay, small steps and not locking ourselves into something that we possibly can or can't deliver down the track. So as far as a utility aspect goes, there was the gamification, the winning balls, which inherently become a digital representation of those winning match points. So the Ash Barty Championship ball, for example, is owned by a DAO called Poseidon DAO, and we know they own that ball, and we know they're keeping that ball. You regularly see offers for people to buy it, but they've said we're not selling the ball. We want to hold on to this as part of a digital memento to what was then, we didn't know, but what is now Ash Barty's last professional tennis match before she retired. So what we actually did is collect all the physical balls from those championship matches. And if you owned that NFT, we then gave you the right to claim a physical ball from that match.
That's brilliant.
So any of the championship winners could go onto a site that we made, connect their wallet. We could prove that they owned that ball. And then we allowed them to claim that ball and sent them the physical ball in this beautiful AO trophy. And
wow, that is actually brilliant. I didn't hear about that. Okay, that's really cool. And I think when it comes to utility for the Australian Open, as you mentioned at the start, like anything is up for grabs. Like partnerships, you can partner with a brand and you could create something and then give it, or you can give like discounts to the holders and things like that. We did talk. You told me something the other day about some future stuff for 2023. But I don't know how much you can reveal so far, but like, what's the thought process going into the new year, and how has the Australian Open reacted to what obviously occurred, to the success? Did everyone think did it go way better than what everybody expected, or was it something it's probably what they thought, or are you guys like doubling and tripling down on everything going into the Open next year? Like, what's the thought process with it all?
I don't think we could have envisaged that it would be as globally leading in this space as it was. I think we pushed the boundaries on what was possible using the technology, and I think we talked to an audience that was engaged in what we were doing, being the tennis fans who wanted to watch tennis and have ownership of tennis viewing and the experience of viewing, and that chance of having a winning ball. And then we were talking to a crypto NFT native audience that wanted to get into a product for the use of the technology, or a project rather, for the use of the technology and the innovative nature of what we were doing. So as we sort of go into the next phase of the project, we are looking at, I guess, setting ourselves apart from a lot of other projects in a sense that when a traditional NFT project gets minted, they make quite a bit of money for the most part, a lot of the time. And then over a period of whether it be 6 months or a year or 18 months, whatever it happens to be, those revenues deplete really quickly. So they host a couple of parties, they make some merchandise, they pay their devs, they pay their social media team, their mods, whoever it happens to be. And all of a sudden, there's no money left for the project to exist anymore. So it's either dead or it has to get bought out by someone else and then somehow reinvigorated. And when we see, I think, the blue chip projects that are out there, they're probably doing okay to be able to facilitate themselves from commissions and royalties, but they're probably less than 1%. I'd hesitate to say that they're even 1%. I think it is probably 0.1 of 1% that actually make up the market.
Well, you still got, for example, VFriends, Azuki, Doodles. They're still raising, they got capital raising 50 mil. I think they all got 50 mil over the last couple of weeks. So I think it's still something where if they're still capital raising, then are they making enough from the royalties? Probably not. And if they're not doing, if they're capital raising, well then what's happening with everybody else?
So we're pretty confident that we've built a model that allows the game to, and we refer to it as the game, but the AO art ball, we've built a model that allows the AO art ball to continue for years into the future. And that will continue to reward existing holders. So anyone that owns a 22 ball will automatically get a 23 ball. That's a given. We've announced that earlier this year. What we will also do is extend the amount of events that the balls are following. So instead of just being 2 weeks of the Australian Open, it'll be 4 weeks of January. And then depending on how our conversations go into the future, it could be Wimbledon, it could be the French Open, it could be the US Open, it could be ATP events, it could be WTA events. Whatever that happens to be, we'll be pushing hard to follow as many tournaments as possible to give our holders as many opportunities as possible to have a winning ball. What we also want to do is is then add a small amount of new balls to the collection. So this year it'll probably be around 2,500 that'll get added to the collection, which will allow new collectors to come in and get an AO 23 ball where they may not have otherwise been able to get an AO 22 ball.
Nice.
And what we'll actually do is then redesign the court. So because we'll now have 9,200 plots on the court, we'll need to redesign it so all of those plots can fit. In doing that, we'll need to remove everyone's balls from the court and then redistribute them again. So everyone will get re-rolled into a new position. So those players that were in a less desirable spot under the net or in the doubles lines, for example, might now be in the service box, or they might be at the baseline. And vice versa for those that were at the baseline or in the back of the service box may now be in a less desirable position. But they know that that's going to happen year on year. So each year there's that incentive to keep coming back and play the game again. But you'll automatically be entered into the game again. So what we'll see from that small amount that added to the collection is a little bit of liquidity that helps us continue to keep the game going, but also allows us to continue to give reward and ownership to the original holders. So a 22 gets a 23, a 23 gets a 24, 24 gets a 25, and it allows everyone to stay in the game as long as possible. But there has to be a little bit of give and take there along the way. And then obviously we continue to add utility to that as well. And we'll have some announcements in the lead up to the AO in the coming week around what that is. Yeah, what that is for holders. Like, we're still refining exactly what that looks like, and negotiating with our ticketing teams and a few of the internal teams about what that means for an AO art ball holder and how we reward them. And I think one of the really unique things about what we're doing is tying the new balls together on the same contract. So I think we've thought about all these elements of what happens in traditional NFT projects when you get airdropped something. What we usually see is if someone gets something for free, they sell it.
Yeah.
Or they sell the item that allowed them to get that thing for free. And we don't want people to relinquish their 22 ball. We don't want them to receive a 23 ball and then relinquish that as well. We want them to build a collection over the years of 22, 23, 24, 25, and keep them in the game as long as possible, because each one of those balls is going to look different. There's also a chance that when you get the airdrop, let's call it an airdrop, when you get the new ball or the airdrop, it'll be a new design. It may be more limited in the collection than others. So you've always got that chance of having an artist ball or an NFT ball or a legendary ball or a signed ball, whatever it happens to be that we produce this year. So yeah, what you'll have to have, you can't have one without the other, which I think is really unique, and we don't see that very often.
What if, like for example, I have a 22 ball, and then I get airdropped the 23 ball. If I wanted to sell, does that mean I have to sell both balls go together as a package?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot more incentive for people to stay in the project.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to see people relinquishing both their balls as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think people will want to relinquish both their balls because it removes them from the game.
Yeah.
It removes them from the utility that will be offered as well, and essentially removes them entirely from the collection, which I think we see less than 2% of our collection on sale at the moment. So if you go and have a look on OpenSea right now, I think about 135 balls on sale. So we know we've got a really strong hold within the group of collectors. So I'm pretty confident that as soon as we make some announcements later in the year, we'll see that disappear pretty quickly.
Yeah. In regards to just as a brand that's gone, so you obviously launched in January, we're now heading into October. The royalties that's obviously occurred, the Aussie Open being seasonal, how was that, like the numbers that have kind of come through as a brand? Is it something where you guys look at and you're like, oh, it's, we want it to be more in a sense, or like, are you guys kind of happy with the financials that are kind of flowing? And does it affect, if it's not where you want to be, like, does it affect the brand at all or not really?
Yeah, I think keeping true to the brand was really important from the start. We wanted to protect the brand because we're an incredibly trustworthy brand at the AO and Tennis Australia. And I think whether that's in Australia or globally, we're a recognised brand. So everything that we did had to have in mind protect the brand.
Yeah.
How do we remain as trustworthy as possible? And I think as we continue to grow the project into the future. And I think keeping in mind that we still are in the first sort of 12 months of our project. We're really only sort of in the 9-month period right now. And obviously that was very heavy in the first 3-4 weeks. And then as we continued to build out into the back of the year, we saw the implications of what is now kind of the crypto winter or bear market as well, and how the product continues to remain strong through that period, I think is on us to continue to build utility into that. So what that means for a consumer as far as how many matches it's following throughout the year, what we're collaborating on with other projects or other partners, what access they get to content that nobody else can get. And I think it's on us to continue to build that out and continue to innovate and push the boundaries on what's possible there, but also listen to our community and see what they want from the project. And if that is tickets to Wimbledon or tickets to the US Open, or it's a Zoom call with a player, then we'll do our best to deliver on that. Like I said, we've got great networks and connections to leverage in that sense, but we also can't do everything for everyone, and we need to work on what protects the project, what protects the brand, and where we have those future objectives and how we still continue to work towards those.
Have you had like throughout the year, like have you done like giveaways in the Discord, or have you partnered up with brands where you'll give them whitelists, for example, to obviously reputable NFT brands and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the really important things with our project is that although it's very Australian based, it's also very international.
Yeah.
So if we're to give physical IRL experience to our holders, that's most likely going to be relatively Australian based. So it's also important that we push that IRL experience out to the global audience, whether that's at NFT NYC, where we did a New York Mets suite and invited 25 people into the suite as holders and gave them a field walk and got the mascots to come in for photos, and we had the AO trophies there and stuff. We really want to create memorable moments for the community. It's not necessarily just, hey everyone, we've got 200 whitelist spots for this Wimbledon release that's coming up. We want to create those moments that either money can't buy or it's a really unique experience. So also at NFT NYC, we got Stan Smith to come and host a clinic for us at a private court in Grand Central Station. We invited 13 people along. They all got to do a private clinic with Stan Smith, and then he signed a pair of shoes for all of them at the end of the clinic. Like, this is proper money can't buy experience that can only be leveraged through our network.
That's brilliant.
But then obviously we continue to have whitelists and trivia days and giveaways. We recently just did an Arsenal collaboration where Arsenal provided us with 10 match day tickets, 10 stadium tours, and 5 signed jerseys to give away.
That's brilliant.
So thousands and thousands of dollars worth of value to give away to our community as part of that group. So we've got a number of whitelists coming up in the next few weeks, and we're always looking to build out on that and give that, I guess, that digital value to the holders that may not always be able to have received the IRL benefits as well.
That's brilliant. I think I'd probably assume that Discord would be the Australian Open's first like online community presence. In essence, they wouldn't have had Facebook groups or anything like that in the past.
We've obviously always had Facebook pages and Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and basically explored everything in the realm of social media. But as far as the first, let's call it a chat room, for better lack of a better term, is absolutely. We didn't have a Discord before we started this project. We also had the AO or the Oz Open Twitter account, but we felt that it was imperative to have an AO Metaverse Twitter account as well, because so much of the information that is sourced for NFT projects and Web3 projects comes through Twitter and Discord.
Yeah.
And so it was really important that we had both of those. And there were some interesting conversations with our social team when we went to them and said, hey guys, we need a new Twitter account for this. And they were like, no way. We've got a Twitter account with 1.7 million followers. Like, what are you talking about? And we're like, no, that's not going to work for this audience. So yeah, they were great, and I think there was a great understanding of support there from the exec team when we chatted to them as well and said, hey, we need a new Twitter account. Like that was a decision that was made in the space of a couple of hours, which it'd usually take weeks for something like that to get over the line, and a lot of people need to weigh in, and you often get the red tape and bureaucracy that comes with that. But we were moving so quickly that fortunately we could bypass a lot of that, and it ended up being critical to the launch of the project because we were able to start teasing both the Oz Open follower and the general Web3 community with something's coming. Probably nothing, little GMs here and there that the community understands. And all of a sudden there was this global sort of what's going on at the AO. And from there it just, launched.
That's brilliant. And when you first went to the social media team about Discord, what was their initial response? And then now it's been 10 months or 11 months since it's launched. What's been the feeling like? And how do you feel like that social platform's helped? Like, do you feel like it's brought the community even closer to the AO? Like, what's been the general consensus of it all?
Yeah, we got some great feedback, and I think for anyone who hasn't used Discord in the past, it's like a marketer's dream. It's a window into the consumer that you've never had before. I think things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter are very curated in the way your audience and your consumer talks to your brand. Whereas Discord is completely raw, and you see conversations and you can see from the outside looking in that the conversations that people are having are really raw. They're talking about your brand. They're talking about your product, like your baby that you've just spent so much time bringing to life that they might be downplaying it, or they're talking about it negatively, or they're talking about it incredibly positively. And then when we were sort of sitting in Discord watching what was going on and hearing the comments about, I've never watched so much tennis in my life. I'm staying up till the all hours in the middle of Europe or South America or wherever they were to watch the end of the matches, to see where that winning point landed.
That's
and
crazy.
To see if it was my plot. We saw this real kind of cohesion between the community, and the conversation was more about tennis than it was about NFTs and Web3 and crypto and fudding in a community and who's flipping and who's a paper hand and whatnot, which you see in so many other collections. There was a genuine sense of we've got a community here that loves Web3 but also loves tennis, and they're passionate about both of those, and they can come into this safe space and talk about that with their groups.
Did you find, like, generally, like, I didn't use Discord before crypto NFTs, didn't even know what it was. Obviously it was massive for gaming. It's been massive for gaming for years, but how did you find people that were never in crypto and NFTs to jump in to Discord? And like, do you find a lot of them were like, that was probably like they only joined because it was the Australian Open? And then how did you also find like onboarding people, like buying an Australian Open NFT? It was probably, for a lot of them, probably could have been their first. So how did you find that whole onboarding process?
Yeah, we actually got some really interesting data. So we did quite a lot of community surveys after the event, which I think was another, I guess, kind of commercial nous that we have in understanding the consumer, which I think a lot of other NFT projects don't do. They talk at the consumer, they don't listen to the consumer, they don't talk with the consumer. So we wanted to hear from our owners, essentially, about where they were, who they were, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they thought about the project, what they wanted for next year, what their hopes and dreams were in this space, or what their challenges were as well. And so we found out through that around 15% of our buyers it was their first NFT that they'd bought. And I think through, I guess, education in the early days before we even went to mint, I don't think we expected it to be that high. I think we would have been lucky if we got 5%, but to see that it was that high was great because it meant that we were bringing, I guess, a tennis fan into the Web3 space, not just necessarily going to the Web3 space and finding the tennis fans or bringing them to tennis, which we know that was a big proportion of, and we know that was part of our strategy going forward when we originally launched was, let's go to that community and bring them to tennis. And that's about fan acquisition. That's that's sort of finding out how we can get more eyes on the Australian Open, more people watching tennis for longer, but also giving them that opportunity of ownership, essentially, and being able to own a piece of the Australian Open court, theoretically. So that sort of worked out really well. And I think that original question around Discord and getting people in there and onboarding is actually really quite simple. Like Discord, although it seems like a scary beast when you get in there and you're actually watching it happen and whatnot, it's actually a really easy user experience. And for people to get in there and be able to communicate, but also not feel like they need to be necessarily part of the conversation, they can just sit back and see what else is going on and explore different rooms and different sections of our Discord to see what's being talked about in there, and then find their group or find their conversation that they want to involve themselves in, I think has been really good. And it's great for us to be able to see and hear and understand what the consumer wants out of that facility.
That's crazy. Obviously, we've gone through this 2022 has been interesting times in the NFT crypto space, but we saw a lot of obviously big corporations enter, and they're still coming. What's the kind of general consensus for other massive, like for the corporations at the moment? Are they scared? Like, do you feel like they're just going to be away, that there's a bad stigma to NFTs at the moment, or do you think everyone's looking past all that and there's going to be a lot that are coming? Like, are there a lot of big brands like silently building that we don't know about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we sort of see in the market right now is this kind of build mentality, and it comes with a consistency of innovation, I think. And when we see who's doing the building and who's released things in the past, there is a consistency between the brands that are doing it. And that is innovation, creativity, market movers, first market movers. They're always the Nikes of the world, Adidas, Tiffany, Dolce & Gabbana. The AO is a great example. There's so many in that list, and the consistency between all of them is they're always first to market with something. And so they're the guys that have been building over the last 2 years, 3 years to get to the point that they're at now. And I think something like the Nike and Artifact collab and acquisition is amazing for the space. They've obviously done incredibly well out of it. We just saw Starbucks a couple of weeks ago release their loyalty program, or their upgrade to the loyalty program. Like, Starbucks are not a laggard brand. They are a brand that is at the forefront of everything that everyone does. Like, they're such a household brand that I think that consistency in what's happening there is something for other brands to look at and kind of take the lead from the Nikes and the Adidas and the Tiffany's and the Dolce & Gabbanas and look at them and go, hey, if these guys are doing it, we should probably be doing it too. There's definitely also that watch out of, like, could it be, should it be? And not everything needs to be an NFT or Web3 or blockchain based. I think there's a lot of brands out there that will probably go, yes, it could be, let's do it. And that's probably where they'll fall, is because they haven't thought through what it actually is, or they don't understand the consumer well enough. So yeah, for any brands that are sort of looking to dive into the space, I think it's finding that person internally that knows the brand, but also knows this Web3 space intimately, is probably invested in, understands the consumer, understands what that could mean or may not mean for the brand that they're working for as well. And I think the more people that I talk to in the space, you hear such similar stories to mine, that I was working in this team and a few people knew that I was dabbling around, and then I ended up being the Web3 guy. Yeah. And you just hear that all the time. And I think for a lot of brands, that's how it's going to happen, because there's not really any experts out there at the moment. No. You might be a subject matter expert, but you're not an expert as such. So it'll be interesting to see who comes next. And I think it's probably an Amazon or an eBay or a PayPal or like a real household brand, particularly a transactional brand that, like a Starbucks, when they come to play properly and that will see a mass market movement as well.
Well, I think that brand actually is going to be Starbucks. Like, I think what they're doing now, no one really knows. We all know it's like a rewards-based system, but they're literally integrating that into like their Web2 reward system. So there's probably millions of people on there, and they're not even going to know that they're literally dabbling with a Web3 based system.
Yep.
And I think that's just I think it's going to be them. Like they're ready to go. Obviously Nike, they're doing some crazy things, but yeah, we're entering some interesting times. So I'm really excited because I feel like Starbucks is going to be the blueprint for the local coffee shop. Now, they might not be able to afford, obviously, this technology, but someone might go and build out a similar type of tech, and then obviously they'll just, they'll sign them up. And then next thing you know, the local coffee shop's got a digital rewards-based system on their phone, and everybody's scanning. So interesting times. Another thing that's I think is really cool, Manchester City I saw starting to dabble into it, and I think like obviously you guys took a first step into it. And I'm sure within the next 10 or so years, when it starts picking up, you'll lift on it. But virtual reality experiences where, let's just say you're from London, you'll be able to put your virtual reality glasses on. You'll probably cost you $20, and next thing you know, you're in a seat in the middle of Hisense Arena or Rod Laver Arena, and you're watching the final. Has there been obviously any talk? I know it's super early, and I'm sure like you guys haven't started building on that, but has there been any talks of where it can go?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've been dabbling in virtual reality for probably 4 or 5 years now. This is another one where, like you say, it's coming. And so we want to make sure we're there when it arrives. And when the masses take up the goggles and everyone's got the goggles on, we've already got the tech built, we've got the cameras built, we've got them on the umpire's chair, we've got them on the net, we've got them in the backcourt, we've got them on the ball kids. Wherever it happens to be, like we've already tested having probably 7 or 8 360 cameras on the court that people can go into virtual reality and explore, because that's probably when an Apple or one of the major brands comes out with their relatively cost-effective headset and it can be taken up by the masses. We want to absolutely be there, and I think it disrupts the normal media rights bandwidth and the normal broadcasting or traditional broadcasting model where, as I said earlier, like the consumer doesn't get to choose their own adventure. They sit down in front of the TV and the producer chooses their adventure for them. We're at this intersection here where we talk about ownership through Web3. That's also ownership of the experience that you want to take yourself on. And you get to choose that adventure and own where you go. And that's what happens in real life. Like you walk into the AO and you look left and you look right, and you look straight ahead and you go, where do I go next? And so we want to be able to create that mentality for people that are having an online experience as well.
Can you see the Australian Open even just experimenting with like YouTube VR, for example, within the next year or two? Maybe obviously it's probably not going to be a hit at the start, but would you put it out there just a test and trial? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're always keen to test and trial that stuff. We're in a lucky position that we know when we've got that time to test, and that's 2 weeks in January. But we're also in an unfortunate position that if we don't test in that 2 weeks, we need to wait another 12 months until we get to do it again. So every time January comes around, there are so many different things that we're working on, whether it's consumer-facing stuff or whether we're actually just working on it in the background. How that comes to life into the future needs to sort of come in line with the objectives of the business, and whether that is revenue generating or audience generating or innovation and creativity. And then you need to weigh those 3 pillars up to see which is going to be most effective. And if at one point in time we need to be focusing on revenue generation, then the innovation might get put to the side, or the audience might get put to the side, or we can flex those, and you flex them by product as well. So the AO Art Ball, for example, is right on the spectrum of innovation and creativity. But in doing that, you also generate revenue, you also generate new audience. Decentraland, for example, no money to be made in Decentraland for our project at all, but a new audience and innovation and creativity, absolutely. So how we focus on that but also the ripple effect that innovation and creativity take means that we can talk to our partners differently. We can talk to our broadcasters differently. We can innovate in what we're providing them as part of their partnership as well.
Okay, that's interesting. With, obviously, I'm assuming you're going to continue Decentraland, obviously, going forward. And is there any in real life events planned, like for NFT holders or anything like that, for the next Australian Open or anything going forward?
Yeah, so we're building out what that looks like at the moment. So there will be a number of events possibly incorporated into the AO where holders get benefit from conference style events or activations within. That could also be in the form of clinics or money can't buy memorable experiences like we talked about before, on-court seats, ground passes, tickets, whatever it happens to be. We're incredibly lucky as a project that we have an enormous amount of assets to pull on, whether that is tickets or experiences or whatnot, or merchandise. We're not in the position where we need to go and create all this stuff from nothing. It's all there. And when I go and talk to the ticketing team and say, hey guys, I need 5 of these and 10 of these and 50 of those and 100 of those, generally speaking, they can facilitate that really quickly for me. So as we build out closer to the AO, there'll be some big announcements, probably in the back end of October, early November, around what that means for AO Art Ball holders, and then also what it means for the projects that I think have also helped us collaborate to where we've got to as well. We want to make sure that the projects that we're working with that have brought their communities to us and we've shared communities with, we're also rewarding them where we can as well.
That's brilliant. I think just on the topic of tickets, it's an interesting one. Ticketmaster obviously entered, a couple months ago, and they're obviously got plans. The way I can see it is pretty much every, let's just say Australian Open, they turn their tickets into NFTs. That creates, a revenue share going forward. If, let's just say the Australian Open put under an upcoming artist on the ticket, and then in 10 years time, that artist becomes like the next big thing. People have like a rookie, artwork of the artist on the ticket, and they'll be able to resell that, and the AO will have royalties on the onto their tickets. Is that something that, I know there's obviously licenses with Ticketmaster or Ticketek and things like that, but would that be something that the Australian Open would obviously consider, and have they thought about that? Is it on their radar to be like, okay, there's another revenue stream that we can create, and we can get extremely creative and
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always things to explore in this space. I think what we saw with the take up of QR codes, for example, when the pandemic hit, or the uptake of digital tickets with the lack of paper tickets or cardboard tickets, and the contact points or less contact points going forward, when you see a mass uptake, you see it really quickly. And I think what we'll see with things like tickets is a mass uptake at some point in time. I don't think it's within the next couple of years, but I think probably maybe in the next 5, we'll start to see that. I don't think it'll be necessarily revenue focused. I think it'll be about interoperability, and that'll be giving someone that's got an AO ticket as an NFT, possibly in a wallet of some description, whatever that happens to be, will get early access to other events, or they will get redemptions, or they'll get loyalty points, or whatever that happens to be. Like you talked about, there's probably loyalty systems out there that are being built that if you have your men's final ticket from last year, that entitles you to, partner benefits from Emirates or Kia or Rolex or Bondi Sands or whoever it happens to be that is a partner of the AO. And they'll bring their loyalty system and it'll talk to the ticketing system. And once that interoperability starts to happen, I think that's where it'll become really powerful. And we're looking at exploring that internally at Tennis at the moment on a much smaller scale. So, for example, onboarding more people into the Web3 space through POAPs. So for anyone watching or listening, POAPs are a proof of attendance protocol. It's essentially a digital ticket stub that sits in your wallet or sits on chain. So anyone who completes an internal learning course at Tennis Australia in the future will receive a POAP. as a recognition of their course. So whether that's a first aid course or a leadership course or a negotiation course, whatever it happens to be,
brilliant.
Instead of giving them an A4 piece of paper that goes in the bottom drawer and says, congratulations, you passed this course, or sending them an email with a PDF on it, we'll give them a digital representation of that course that holds all the information about that course, links that they can follow. And then if in 5 years' time they need to renew that, they know where to go to get it. If they want to rebuild their resume in 5 or 10 years' time and they're thinking, oh, what courses did I complete while I was at tennis? They can go into their POAP app and see all the leadership courses that they completed in that time. So I think that's just a very small cog in a big wheel of where we can sort of help to onboard more people into this new tech.
That's brilliant. I feel like the Australian Open is literally covering everything. Like a proof of attendance protocol that will end up turning into like a soul-bound token, which then's obviously that's sent to the consumer. So it's actually verified on the blockchain that Tennis Australia or the Australian Open have sent it to them. So it literally cuts out, like when you read a resume and they're like masters at this university or whatever thing that they just put on just to write there, you don't actually know it's true. Where if it's on the blockchain and it's verified, you can't lie. So that is actually insane. What aren't you guys covering? You've literally got it all covered. Going back to the rewards, so do the Australian Open actually have a rewards system or anything like that in place at the moment? Or no?
No, not as such. So there's different programs within the AO ecosystem, and you can be a member of those programs and you get benefits from those, but not a point system as such. So pre-sale tickets go on sale today, for example, but people within our membership community will get access to that. So that could also be part of our partnership program where, let's say ANZ, for example, will give their consumers access to our pre-sale. So we don't have a loyalty program as such, but that's not to say it's not something that comes in the future.
I think it definitely will. You guys are covering literally everything else.
Yeah. Look, I personally think that like blockchain tech and Web3 tech lends itself so well to the loyalty world. Like it's such an old traditional world, literally, where like the coffee shop example that you said, you had a business card and you stamped the business card and then it probably got wet or you spilt your coffee on it or you forgot it in the car or you left it at home. Exactly. Like we've seen the migration of credit cards go from a card that went in a machine with a carbon copy piece of paper and click clack, and then someone took that to the bank and then the business got their money 5 days later. And then technology evolved and we got RFID and NFC, and then it got into a digital machine, and then that moved into your phone, and then it moved into your watch, and all that happened over about 20 years because it was all reliant on physical technology. Where in Web3 world, we're reliant on digital technology. There's really nothing physical that comes into play at all. So as long as you've got the phone or the computer, you can have that loyalty program built into it. And you can use the technology in the phone to read the QR code. You're still not doing anything with a physical technology. It's all digital technology. So I think it'll move really quickly through that space.
It's bloody nuts. Like when you see the space of the next 10, 15, 20 years, like evolving, and like just, I know it's a bold prediction, pretty much just to end this. Like no one's gonna hold you to this, but like for mass adoption to actually occur into the digital space, number one, do you believe it's going to happen? Which I'm sure you're going to say yes, that's why we're here. But number two, how long do you think, like, do you reckon we're 2 years off, 5 years off, 10 years off? Like when do you think we're going to have that tip?
That's a tough question.
It is, and I'm not going to hold you to it.
Look, I think in the next 3 years, maybe that sounds like a random number. 3, usually everyone says 2 or 5.
Yeah.
3 feels like about the right amount of time. I think it allows us to come through this cold market that we're in at the moment. And it'll allow people to build and utilize the technology. And right now we're in this like mass building phase, and we're going to see, it'll be like search engines 10, 15 years ago. There was so many search engines, but it came down to who had the best user experience, the best brand, and who, I guess, gave the user the most benefit and the easiest, most seamless experience. That's what's going to happen here as well. You're going to see hundreds of loyalty programs built out, and there'll be one that stands above all the others. It'll be exactly like MySpace to Facebook or LimeWire to Spotify. There'll be so many programs come and go, but there'll be a few that stand above everyone else. And I think that's probably 3 to 5 year. And who takes up the mass adoption? And that is the Starbucks of the world, the Amazons, the eBays. And let's be honest, most of them are probably already using blockchain technology, but we don't know it as a consumer. Like there's so many business-based products out there right now that are already using blockchain, but we don't know it. After all, it is just a digital ledger that is storing information. So how you choose to use it, and this probably is the second part of the answer to the question, is really creativity in this space is limited by your imagination. So if you can come up with an idea and you think it's right to use Web3 technology or blockchain technology to execute it, it possibly is. And then you can push that idea because the technology can be manipulated and adapted really easily by some really smart people that work incredibly quickly. And when those ideas come through, and it's a little bit like AO Artball, we had an idea, we had no idea how to do it, but we talked to the guys who know how to do this stuff, and they were like, yep, we know how to do that. Give us 24 hours. And a day later, they'd come back with the concept, how it would work, the information that they needed, what they needed from me, what they needed from Tennis, what they needed from Hawkeye. And 24 hours later, we had all that. And then they were building, and then we were away, and it all happened in the space of a couple of days. And that all came on the back of some creative ideation. So I think while we're in this creative phase, education and creativity, go crazy with some ideas.
Right, Ridley, thank you so much for obviously jumping on. I feel like you've just provided so much value, and even for myself, like there's a lot of parts that I didn't like. Just getting into the game of the Australian Open, I didn't really understand it until obviously I've spoken to you properly, and I think you guys are definitely onto a winner. You guys are definitely flying, and I can't wait to see what you guys are going to do. Like, as I said, you guys are ahead on absolutely everything. Like, you blow my mind, even like VR. Like, I'll be waiting for that. I'm just going to jump in. I only use my goggles like 1 or 2 times a year, so I don't really smash it, but I want to just jump on YouTube VR and go watch a Kyrgios match or something. So just a plug. So anyone that would be interested, it's the AO Metaverse on Twitter.
Yep.
From there, you can obviously click the link tree. There's a link to check out, obviously, the websites and everything like that. Is there anywhere else that they could probably...
Yeah, I think that's the greatest source. Like, Linktree is such an amazing product. We have everything there. Give them a little shout out there. We know the guys from Linktree.
Yeah, from New South Wales, aren't they?
They've been fantastic.
Yeah.
They're such a great product. And I think just jump on there. And if you want to join the Discord, it's easy. If you want to follow along on Twitter, it's easy. Jump in soon because there'll be some announcements coming. But yeah, big shout out to you guys and everyone else who's supported the project for so long now. And we can't wait to show you what we've got coming for AO 23.
I'm getting in. You got me over the line. I've got to buy one. There was one, I think it was 0.08. It was a green and blue one that I was looking at the other day. I'm like, oh, this is cool. So now that I've had a chat to you, you got me over the line. I'm in.
Well, now that you know that the court's being re-rolled, you don't have to worry about your court position. So just go and sweep the floor.
Yeah, done. But thank you, mate.